Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Welcome back, everyone. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with today's guest. Joining us, we have Malisa Hapner. She's an LCSW out of Oklahoma. Malisa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Melissa and I connected over Threads, and I'm excited to hear her unique perspective on grief and how that impacts our day-to-day functioning and thought spirals. Melissa, do you mind introducing a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the questions?
Yeah. So I'm Melissa. I never know how to introduce myself, but I had a lot of personal losses early-ish. My dad died when I was 15, suddenly, of a morphine overdose. And then my mom died right before I turned 22, and I was pregnant with my first kid. Basically, complications related to cirrhosis and Hep C. And when my dad died, that was like the first real experience with that heavy of a loss. So I have a master's in social work, and my first job outside of that program was at a hospice because I felt very called to help people who were going through the grieving process, even prior to death, obviously, with anticipatory grief. But I just kept thinking, I remember the nurses in the room when my mom died, and I don't remember all their names, but I remember their faces. I remember the comfort. I remember all of those things. And so I knew that even though we couldn't necessarily change the outcome, I could help change that middle part and make it as peaceful as possible. So I did hospice full time until 2007, and then pivoted because I reached burnout, not because of the work I was doing with patients, but more like the environment that you have to do that work in. I was getting older, and like the fear started settling of being in strangers' houses, and it wasn't like my normal routine patients that was freaking me out. It was like every time I got a new one, I'm now having anxiety, whatever. So anyways, I do still work very part-time doing bereavement work with newly bereaved people through the same hospice. So I really like doing that. Most people that I call are like, we're fine, but I always know it was divine intervention whenever someone answers and they're like, you called on the perfect day. Yeah. So that's, among other things, I do still do some work with newly bereaved people. So that brought me here today.
Great. With grief, it can feel incredibly isolating, even in a room full of people. What do you think about grief makes it feel so isolating? And what do you think it looks like, especially in the clinical work that you do, to start to break down those walls?
I really think that the reason it is so isolating, and I guess I can only really say from my personal experience, it was, and this is what everybody says back to me when we're talking in those early days, but it was because I was surrounded by people who didn't understand that pain. And what I've since learned in adulthood is that we are all really dismissive people because we are very emotionally unavailable. So when somebody comes to us with something as heavy as grief, and it doesn't even have to be as heavy as grief, my God, people dismiss everything. But when they come to us and we don't know how to fix it, it brings up our own shame and our own pain from different things that we feel like we aren't doing well. So we have to dismiss that person in order to dismiss the feelings that are coming up in us, because we do not know how to sit with somebody in their pain, whether it's grief or anything else. We are not naturally attuned to other people's emotions. We're not even naturally attuned to our own. So when somebody comes to us with something very permanent like death, and we don't know what that looks like or feels like or smells like or sounds like, we just dismiss them. Yeah. And that was my experience. Was I was so alone because I learned I would much rather sit in my pain by myself than to ever again go to somebody seeking support and them have me look on the bright side, tell me they're in a better place, all of the stupid platitudes that people want to say, meaning obviously, but some of them are very hurtful. And they're in the better place. I'll personally hit you if you say that to me, but that's a pretty benign one compared to Jesus needed them more, any of the things. So I believe that's the foundation of why grief is such an isolating experience, because nobody knows how to support us. And then you just like, your soul just starts gravitating to the grievers because they're going to accept you. It's a club and you don't know how to join it. You don't know how to find the people who are hurting in a way that you are hurting. And I would say, though, that the biggest revelation I've had in all of this recently is if we can teach people how to ask for the support they need, identify what that is, and then learn how to ask for what they need then people are jumping at the chance to help you, to support you, to whatever. But if you just leave people in emotionally unavailable land, they're going to protect their own hearts because they don't know how to deal with this. So there's no manual for helping your loved one grieve.
Yeah.
So I think part really is just teaching people how to identify what it is they need in that moment and ask for it.
Yeah. You bring up a couple interesting points we talk about on the show. We live in a very grief illiterate, very grief phobic society. And until you've experienced that life-changing loss, it's like you don't speak the grief language yet.
Right.
And how do we find the people that speak that same language so that we can feel understood? And then there's someone to lean into that pain space with us so that we feel that less alone.
Yeah, and I think too, usually the people who understand are going to be the first people to respond. I will be really honest, even I, who have tons of experience, both personally and professionally, because those were just my first two losses. I've had a bajillion since then.
Sure.
I have a friend whose dad just died, and she is really not doing well, like at all, but I'm not her therapist. You know what I mean? And I have to place like personal boundaries around myself. Like I can't be available 24/7 to this level of grief. I can't be there every time. I'm the only one she's going to because she knows I know, and I'm not going to hurt her. But at the same time, I have to protect myself too.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, if we can teach people how to identify what it is they need in that moment when because I don't think you really reach out for help until you hit one of those times where you're like crying so hard you can't breathe, or you really wonder if you can die from how bad this hurts. And I think those were the times that I was like, okay, maybe I should talk to a friend or something. This isn't good. And having no idea, though, what I would say, how can I ask you to help me? I don't know what will help me.
Right. Which leads into that next question, right? People hesitate to reach out in the first place or share their grief because there's this fear of being misunderstood, because it's maybe a new experience for us. We don't even understand it. When you have clients in that confusing space, how do you work with them to help create community where they can feel supported and seen?
I think for me, it really is just about finding a way to experience the feeling in a little bit of a different way, to recognize kind of the mind, body, spirit connection. Like you can't get through grief just doing a grief counseling without addressing every other part of your system, your body. And I think one of the things that really helps people is when I say, I don't think that you are recognizing that loss is a trauma and your body has gone through something because it doesn't know how to process this trauma. So teaching people how to regulate their nervous system at the same time that they're learning emotional regulation and the mind-body connection, just bringing all of those practices and even spiritual practices into play teaches someone how to identify what it is they need in that moment. A nap, a shower, a snack, a walk, or just a coffee with a best friend. It's not revolutionary. It's not like I need someone to lie me on a couch and listen. And that's the thing too.
Big. It can be those small things that add up to us feeling just baseline.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to feel great for a while. Like, those are going to be intense. And learning what it takes to help us be at baseline. It's so important.
That's all the work I do is how do you get from, if you're in a state of hypoarousal, how do we get back up to here? If we're in hyperarousal, how do we get to here? What do I need if I'm feeling this? And checking in with my body. I am a person who, because of some really complex childhood trauma, lived in a state of hyperarousal from the time I woke up till the time I went to sleep. There was no way for me to identify what I needed until I could slow everything down. Some of that being my brain, thoughts that were very loud, the thoughts that drive all of those emotions to begin with.
Of thoughts that drive, you often talk about people getting stuck in thought cycles rather than feeling their grief. Can you explain what these cycles look like and why they keep us from moving through our grief?
Yeah, because I think since our brains are not like really designed to feel, they're very much designed to keep us safe and alive, right?
Sure.
What happens, and if you're not a person, like if somebody's listening and they're not a person who's done any of this type of work, some of this is going to sound a little woo, but like for real, I remember the first time doing exercises to feel my body instead of be in my brain. I can feel the jump. If something happens and I don't want to process it, there's a jump up to my brain because the first thing it wants to do is start like overthinking about something because there's control in that. I can get wrapped up in a thought cycle and, oh, if this and then blah, blah, I can fight with the person, I can cry over a person, whatever. That's not feeling. And it took me a really long time to learn how to feel, like a very long time. I had to do experiential work and all kinds of stuff. Now, grief is not something that's super, it's probably the one natural thing. Like that pain is the one natural thing that we can feel because it is all consuming and it will take over every cell of your body.
Yeah.
So easy to get through some feelings with that. But you can't always process those feelings because you're in your head. So when you have a loss, it's almost like, okay, I'm showing my age here, but like that movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg, okay? Like where you can see like the soul like jump in or out or whatever. That's what happens. So it jumps up to your head and it's, oh, let's engage in a thought spiral so that we can have control. So things like if it's grief, like I'll give my friend as an example, her dad passed suddenly overnight, was found, and they don't know what happened. And apparently they won't do an autopsy if it like doesn't look like foul play. And so I don't know why this matters so much to her because I don't know that it would matter to me, but I also don't know. So it matters a lot to her right now. All she can think about is what happened, even though she's spoken with medical professionals who have given her like a lot of information to deduce that it was more than likely this. She has said the words, I don't want to believe that. Why? Because she doesn't want to sit with the fact that she lost her dad and she's never going to see him again.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot different. That thought that drives that emotion is a lot different than saying this. And really, if you just take 2 steps back from what I'm saying and look at that as an observer, you can see and feel the different energy involved in those too. That's jumping, that's fire, that's just a lot of electricity. But I'm never going to see my dad again. That's rain, and that is sitting in deep darkness. That's 2 very different experiences. But see, like a lot of the thought spirals, of course, they're happening to keep us engaged in something that will give us a sense of control, but they also drive so many emotions. And like, I remember I was on the way to my aunt's funeral a few years ago, and I had asked to speak at her funeral. And they were like, yes. And then I was thinking about what I was going to say. And I had my little notes or whatever, but I decided to turn on this song and I knew better. But I turned on a song that I don't let myself listen to. Oh my God. Within 5 minutes, I was a hysterical mess in my car because this song It's that one stupid song, Dancing in the Sky, I think is what it's called. But it's not stupid. It's really good. It's very pretty and it just gets you every time. But it got me in this. What I kept thinking was, I have so many holes in me from all the losses. And eventually I'm like, what am I going to be? Like, this is too much. Like, when is enough? Like, I can't keep losing everyone in my life, blah, blah, blah. That song started those thoughts. And then I was a freaking mess. So I was like, okay, we're going to turn that song off. We're going to turn that off. And then I called a friend and I said, bro, I was just totally in my head. Like, I'm really okay. I did this to myself, but I do need to talk about something else for a minute because I got to go in this funeral and talk. So I can't be like crying. I was so sad. I was so sad. And so I was just like, hey, that was almost a manufactured emotion because I was handling her loss well. Like, I was okay. And so I just needed to pick up the phone and get out of my head for a minute and talk about something different.
And that's the tricky thing with loss too, right? You were doing okay with your aunt, but then when we start to think about the loss, it's like it brings up all of those
Triggers every other loss.
losses
Yeah.
because grief compounds, and our bodies remember that, and it brings up all
Every
of that
time.
pain. Even if you've done heaps of work, you're still missing your person because grief doesn't go away. It just gets different. It's still always there. It's the white noise in the background.
Yeah, you'll definitely just see it differently depending on the situation. But yes, every time I have a loss, every one of them comes up. Like, I remember when my dad's mom died, losing my mind at the funeral, like crying for 2 hours straight because all I kept thinking was like, I knew that was the beginning of loss. I remember when my dad died being like, oh, okay, who's next? This is a thing now. And when it was my grandma, it felt like I was losing my dad all over again because that was his mom. And that was a beautiful connection I still had to him. People were looking at me like I was crazy because I was losing it, but they didn't understand that I was just in a thought spiral about my dad, my grandma, and now also everyone else I'm going to lose. So again, that's the way a thought spiral can get you in a really bad place.
So back to I loved your example with listening to the music, because many people default to that overthinking or analyzing. I'm going to make a to-do list, a checklist. Like, I want to be in that productive, working, not feeling space instead of sitting with their feelings, because leaning into the pain of grief sucks. And we are a pain avoidant society. Anyway,
absolutely.
So how do you guide clients toward engaging with their feelings rather than intellectualizing their grief?
This might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't encourage people to sit for long periods of time. It's more like acknowledge, confront, sit with, but you'll know that you're still in your head if you're still thinking about how bad this is. But if you're in your heart and you're just crying or something, you'll know that you're in your feeling space because you just feel that loss. And you say, I am so sad because I'm never going to see my dad again. Or today's my birthday and I wish my dad was here. Like, different things like that. All you have to do is acknowledge that. And if your chest feels hollowed out and you're crying while that happens, good chances you felt it. Now let's work on like how to move through that. So that's the work I do mostly, is grief or any other feeling that you are dealing with has to be acknowledged, seen, held, and then you can release it for that moment. I get a little nervous because a lot of people answer the phone and they say, yep, we're doing fine, just keeping ourselves real busy. Yeah, and I'm always like, now, if I didn't have so many of those calls to make, I'd probably dig in a little bit. But if they're saying they're fine, it's like, all right, call me if you need me. But the thing is that I've been the person who kept themselves busy and will work, but then you're going to, like, when it was my mom's mom that died and she primarily raised me, I was intellectualizing so badly, didn't realize it, but I was just, nope, and then shutting it down. But then what I saw was an increase of rage and an increase of binging on donuts. That's how that went. So as I revolved through and learned to understand what I was doing wrong there, because I didn't understand the difference between feeling and intellectualization. It took a really long time to understand that. So once I realized, like, oh, let's maybe not do that, and I can just sit with it. You don't have to sit very long
No.
to release something and move through it. And then you can go busy your brain, and you should go busy yourself with something that feels yummy. But you have to take that pause and experience the feeling first.
Yeah, I say that all the time. You got to feel the feelings and you can't tame it till you name it. And it's we're like mason jars and we don't have a lid on. And when we're in our most healthy space, we can access our thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, all of that with ease. But then like we experience a loss or a trauma, we clamp that lid on real tight. Oh, I can't let anything out. And so then that pressure builds. And so even if we're just in therapy for an hour a week or during a walk with a friend, releasing the pressure valve just a little bit on that jar. You don't have to take it all the way off because we're not ready to do that. Just releasing that pressure a little bit can help in maintaining that day to day, that oscillating between the grief work and the life work.
Yeah, because you know what? For myself, I don't find that talking about things is super helpful for a long period of time. It gets me very escalated very quickly.
Sure.
And so I think that's a common misconception too, is that like you need to go and sit with your friend while all they do is talk about how sad they are. No, baby. You just go and, like I said, have a walk, a coffee, play a card game. That is a very meaningful way to ask for help or give help for somebody else. But I think until you're in the club, you don't really realize that those are things you do need. You do need somebody to lift your spirits a little bit. And who's your friend that can do that? And let them know this is what that might look like. Yeah, I might break down and cry for a minute. I'm going to move right through that. And I'm going to ask you to acknowledge it, don't acknowledge it, or whatever it is you need. If you are a person who knows I need hugs in scenarios like that, then let your friend know. But the biggest work that I do is teaching people about their expectations. And because I lived a life hurting my own feelings, creating all of these like social contracts full of my expectations, unreasonable to begin with, but also I wasn't communicating any of it. So because this is all things I figured out in like retrospect. I process in real time. Now I know, okay, if I'm feeling this is generally what I need, you have to go to your body first. What does my body need first? Like nap, water is a big one. Drink your water, a shower, or a walk, or food. And then it's okay. I was never really a hugger. I don't feel comforted by hugs. Like just from my friends. If I'm going through something, you hugging me makes me feel weird. I don't need that. But I do have friends who are huggers. And so I'm like, do you need a hug right now? And they'll say yes. But it would be really lovely if we could identify those things in ourselves and just ask for what we need.
Yeah. Just in tandem, often society really pushes us to quote unquote move on really quickly after a loss. Because again,
2 months,
society, oh yeah, 3 days of bereavement leave and oh, you're fine now, which definitely can make the isolation feel worse. So when you're working with clients, how do you help support them in pushing back on that narrative and letting their grief be on its own timeline?
First, we always have to discuss how Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did not intend for people to grieve in stages. That was written for people who were dying. I just remind them, like, baby, this is an experience you've had before, so you are relying on programming that you received through media. Like, that's it. Because if nobody's ever taught you about this, you only know about it from commercials, movies, TV shows. That's it. And songs, but that's it. And now social media, TikTok, all of that, but you actually don't know. Here you are at the professional's office, and I am telling you that is BS. Grief is a lifetime, and it does look way different. My dad's been gone for 30 years. He died when I was 15. I'm 44. And his birthday's coming up. And it doesn't feel the way it used to at all. But some days out of the blue, it does.
Yeah.
After 30 years, some days out of the blue. My mom's been gone for 20. That one's really tough, especially when I'm doing things with my daughter and it's the holidays. And I've been acutely aware of how little family I have. I'm very lonely sometimes around the holidays because I don't have that. So yeah, it comes up, but it doesn't make me heave and almost throw up from pain. So when we say it gets better, that's what we mean. It's not an all-consuming emotion anymore. But yeah, sometimes it can be every now and then. Everyone else around us received the same programming.
Sure.
So they are pushing us, A, because they don't know, but B, because they're freaking uncomfortable. That's all it is. They don't know how to deal with it. I always warn people like, baby, first of all, if somebody hasn't already said something really stupid that makes you feel violent, it's going to come. So know that. And they're like, oh, already, every time, already. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry that happened to you, but that's not going to be the last time.
No.
And it does make you feel violent. And I want to sit with you in that because you're allowed to. They are dumb and it was rude and it hurts you. And that is okay for you to feel violent about it.
Yeah.
But then the second part of that is you're only going to get 2 weeks of support. And it doesn't matter what
Maybe a
loss
month.
it is.
Maybe a month.
Yeah. 2 months if you are a bereaved parent. But that is it. If it's your parents, your best friend will be there for 2 to 6 weeks. But then after that, even if they haven't lost their parent, they don't know how to support you beyond that point.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's the programming that we receive, and nobody knows how to sit with somebody in their grief. But that's why I'm so passionate about saying it doesn't have to be, let's hold hands and I'll help you process. It's just very much about, is there a physical need I can meet? Can I please come clean your dishes? Or
Sure.
is there something that's just feeling really overwhelming? Because grief is an all-consuming. It starts at your crown and just goes all through your toes. You don't feel the same because you're not the same. Your body is foreign to you even. I remember how shaky I would feel, like just often, just my nervous system was just wrecked because I didn't know what to do with everything that was happening inside of me. And if I had known, I could have asked for specific things, but I didn't. And so anybody just meeting a small need was so helpful. If you're not a person who knows how to sit and listen to somebody, I don't encourage it anyway, just because it doesn't help anyone to sit and talk about it. I don't believe that part of therapy is super helpful. Like, I think that if we as a society can get a little bit more comfortable with expressing ourselves, identifying the things that are going on inside of us, then we can ask for help, and we're better at giving the help because we get it. So we're like, oh, okay, I know how to offer this. But that's so much of the work I do in general, is just like teaching people, if you get really familiar with you, really familiar with everything that makes you who you are, no judgment, because I'm a person who will become a raging psycho if I'm hungry or tired. And then you give me a combination, I am a bomb ready to explode. That's who I am as a person. So I know I have to eat and I have to rest. I have to take those very seriously. They have to be very big priorities in my life. That's something I know about myself.
Yeah.
But because I'm really aware of that without any kind of judgment, I can see it when like my daughter, I'm like, oh, but all right, you need some protein, baby. She's only 10. And I'm like, okay, let's get you some protein. But the more we can consume ourselves and love ourselves and meet us exactly where we are, the more compassion and understanding that we can have for others. Even people in the club perpetuate a lot of these nasty, like unforgiving, uncaring cycles because they didn't receive the love and support that they needed when they were going through the grief. And now it's like a whale. And they'll dismiss you harder than someone not in the club sometimes, because really what they're saying is, that's not fair. I didn't get that when it was my turn.
Yeah.
And even, I know I did this a little bit. I have a friend she's pretty compassionate, but she really lacks the ability to put herself in someone else's shoes if it's something that she has no experience with. And so when it was me going through things, she would do really hurtful things because she didn't know, and I would forgive her because she didn't know. But then when it was my turn to be there for her, the bitterness, tension, and resentment that had grown from all of those experiences, they were sitting there waiting in between us because they hadn't been dealt with.
Yeah.
But there was a part of me that wanted so badly to dismiss her the way she had dismissed me because it wasn't fair. Sure, now you get it, but that doesn't take away all the hurt that you gave me.
Yeah.
But let me just clear that up by being like, I should have addressed that way differently a long time ago. But it doesn't matter if we know what's right, what's wrong. These are the cycles that we perpetuate. It doesn't matter. We are all doing some form of this.
Yeah. So then moving into that practical space as we start to move into wrapping up a bit, what would you say are some tools or exercises you recommend to help grievers process their feelings rather than staying stuck in their head?
First, if you find yourself thinking, the first thing you need to say to yourself is, oh, I'm in my head and I'm not in my heart. And for a while, I had to use my body as a cue. Like, both simultaneously, I'd notice I can't quit thinking about something. And also, my back is hurting really bad from how tense I am.
Mm.
So that would trigger me to think, oh, I need to experience the feeling. And the next step for me is, if you are having trouble identifying exactly what it is, first of all, it's loss. Most of us feel loss and betrayal in our tummies and that roller coaster feeling.
Mm.
And so just acknowledging not just, oh, this is a loss, but do I also feel abandoned by this person? Do I feel rejected by this person? Do I feel neglected by this person? And those are all natural, normal things to feel. Just because they're gone doesn't mean that you're not allowed for those things to come up, because they're going to. These are woundings that were created far before this person even died. So this death just opens those wounds wide, and you have to acknowledge which wounding's being hit. Like, it's not just loss. There is also abandonment, neglect, rejection, all of those things. I'm just feeling really called to say this. If you've lost somebody who caused you a great deal of harm, and you are trying to figure out why it's affecting you the way it is, do work around wounding that you had prior to the loss, because it is just opening up all of those really wide, and they're wounds you didn't deal with to begin with. And I think it's just confusing because we don't know why we're feeling what we're feeling, but it's so easy if you can just trace it back to one of those wounds. Oh, betrayal is coming up. Oh, that's weird. I'm feeling rejected. Get curious about this process, because it is trying to teach you something too. And you don't have all of these ruminating thoughts and feelings for no reason. They're coming up as a pattern for a reason in your life. So if you can step back a little bit from your grief and get curious about why this one particular thing keeps recycling through, that's going to help you a great deal. But more importantly, remember that no matter how recent your loss is or how long it's been, you are allowed to feel peace, joy, love, worthiness, deserving, understanding, compassion. All of the good things in the world you're still allowed to experience them. And it doesn't mean that you didn't love the person that you lost. And I think so many people get wrapped up in guilt because they are, quote unquote, moving on. What are you supposed to do? I think some people think they're supposed to build a treehouse at the cemetery or something, because that, in essence, if you think that you're not allowed to feel joy anymore, even if it was your child you lost, then picture yourself building a treehouse at the cemetery and ask yourself if that seems reasonable. If it does, then do it. If that's what you feel like you need to do, go talk to the city about it. But I don't think that's what is going to help you. I also always encourage people to connect with their loved one in whatever their comfort level is. And for some people, that means they sit at the kitchen table that they sat at with their spouse for 40 years having coffee in the morning, and they will still have that conversation with them every morning. And I am 100% in support of that.
Yes.
Some people build a beautiful garden in their backyard full of their loved one's favorite flowers. Some people call the hummingbirds to their yard because their mom loved hummingbirds. Whatever it is for you to connect with that person, do it as often as you want, but at least once a week. And then around the holidays, acknowledging the empty chair. You don't have to continue the same traditions, or you can, with the acknowledgement that it looks a little different, because nothing's going to be the same without this person. Nothing. You're never going to be the same. Your family's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. It has now changed. But it's up to you to decide, do we keep the old traditions? Do we do a mingling of the old and the new? Whatever it is, up to you. But if you can just quit judging your healing, that would be really good too.
Absolutely. Melissa, this has been a really great conversation, and I am sure our listeners would love to know how to connect with you. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Okay, so on Instagram, I think I am Melissa.Hepner, Malisa. My website is empowered with melissahepner.org, and that between the link tree on my Instagram and the website, that pretty much gets you any area that I'm in. My website has my podcast on it, my membership site, everything. So
amazing. Thank you so much again for such a great conversation. I love how you conceptualize loss, and I think it sounds like you're doing really amazing work for your clients and the community that you serve, and way to advocate for grief.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. This has been really nice.
All right, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to be kind to yourselves today, and we'll see you next time. Take care. That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms, with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.